Hey guys, it's Greer. Welcome to this week's podcast of how fashion came to be. This week's episode is called The Influence of Fashion on Paper, and we're going to be deep diving into fashion and journalism from 1890 to 1910. This week, I have a special guest friend and journalism junkie, Gabriella Masti, here with me today to share some cool facts along the way.
Hey guys, it's Gabby. I'm really happy to be here. I've studied journalism, but I haven't really studied fashion journalism, so I'm really interested and excited to see what Greer has to tell me about.
Well, Gabby, I'm so happy that you're here. And to get started, I just want to bring us back to life in the late 1800s and early 1900s. So during this time, women were just facing like so many difficulties. We see the rise in suffragettes. Women don't want to live that typical housewife life anymore. We see them fighting for their rights. They want to vote. They want work equality, and most importantly, they want dress reform. Women just really realized like their own worth during this time and that they were equal, if not honestly better than men. So, also during this time, we see a lot of women gaining jobs. And with this, the clothing that women were in during this time was very like restricted. It didn't allow them to move. It was heavy and it was just like not suitable for them being able to work and move. So, yeah.
Well, going off of that, an interesting fact about that time is the rate of employed women from 1890 to 1910 was increased from 2.6 million to 7.8 million. And this really just like shows how women were wanting to work and they were ready to find their place in society.
Yeah, I really like that fact. It's very beneficial to my research. And with there becoming more work for women just in general, and with this, many businesses began to like gain much wealth during this time. It's called the Gilded Age for a reason. It's a time of wealth and luxury. And with businesses growing, the journalism industry grew tremendously during this time. And it honestly, in my opinion, was because of specifically a particular journalist, Joseph Pulitzer.
I love
Yeah,
Joseph
he's one of my
Pulitzer.
favorites. So Pulitzer basically created just like a new means to journalism, like a new journalism. One of the main things that he did was he created five new sectors of news, which like allowed women, fashion, and lifestyle to find its place within these papers. And it's not necessarily called news, but it's within the papers and its story. These new five sectors were the crusade, expose, scandal, stunt, celebrity gossip, and the sob stories. This allowed for like so many new jobs within journalism and like so many more topics to write about, especially because of the way they were producing these papers was all the time. A lot of people had subscriptions, so they were just putting them out as quick as they could. And with women writing, there was just so many more opportunities. And during this time was actually the first time we ever saw women's fashion be critiqued in the papers. Like a few of my favorite ones are women were dressed. Their looks looked like the carriage dress or the walking costume or the calling suit. So the media was basically the first time to ever create stereotypes for specific women's fashion. During this time was the first time we ever see the hourglass silhouette used as a term, and basically they came up with the hourglass silhouette because of this silhouette. It had a very constricted waist, it had leg button sleeves were just kind of these over dramatic large sleeve, and it had a very rounded hip and it rounded your breast.
I think that the hourglass silhouette that you're talking about is still to this day the one we hear about the most.
Oh yeah,
For example, the Kardashians, they're everywhere, all over social
the
media.
Kardashians brand is literally the hourglass silhouette.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
So, along with that, along with those new sectors and stereotypes for women coming into journalism, many women were hired, and Pulitzer was actually the first to hire a woman, Nellie Bly.
I love Nellie Bly. She's one of my favorite women's journalists ever. She has a really interesting story, and when I was studying journalism, I thought she was one of the most interesting people to learn about.
Oh, yeah, she was definitely one of my favorite women to learn about within journalism. Well, let me tell you a little bit about her. She was a woman who wanted a job in journalism. She went up to Pulitzer and he gave her a special mission to go on, and if she had completed it, she would be hired. And obviously she completed it, and she became one of the leading journalists of the time. This then led to Pulitzer obviously hiring more women, and other journalists began to hire women to write these certain types of stories, from just sob stories to advice to fashion. So basically, because of these small stories and these new journalists, a new sector of journalism was able to begin. We now see the start of fashion magazines and articles that were specifically related to types of clothing. Um, so basically, with the start of fashion journalism, its impression on America came along with it. So during this time, because of the growth of the textile industry and department stores were now opening this time, clothing was a hot item. Everyone wanted it. Everyone wanted everything
Right.
they could possibly get their hands on. Ready to wear fashion was also beginning, which was the leading market for these department stores at this time, besides couture. The ready to wear just offered more movable clothing for women, children, and men, just everybody to get more accessible clothing. And because of, just women gaining the workforce, they needed clothes to wear to work, so they had to go
Right.
shopping.
Yeah.
And because of like the fast rate that they could produce clothing and paper during this time, um, we see fashion journalism trying to stay being produced at the same rate that the
Yeah.
clothing and the paper could be.
Interesting.
And because of all this, the fashion press literally became its own monopoly within journalism. Like, women were wanting subscriptions on literally everything related to fashion and anything feminine. And this literally led to the rise in consumerism, and the advertising market was also able to grow as well. The ads were able to be placed throughout like any magazine or paper with clothing, and people were literally able to compare stores and their prices and the clothing at every store on just like a paper in front of them. And like everyone needed clothes,
Yeah.
so everyone was looking at them.
Uh-huh.
Everyone just wanted to look at them. Like, the readers were literally able to see everything on one page like they had never seen before. So, and because of the popularization, which basically drew from like advertisements in magazines and just them using illustrations in small ways, the idea of a fashion editorial came.
Interesting. I actually never knew there was a difference in fashion or between fashion magazines and editorials.
Yeah. So basically, an editorial is like the words, branding, photos, idea, everything all in one. Like, it is like it's everything. Like, it's the commercial, the idea, the want, the look. It's all in one. Not many words are needed to get its point across. Usually for editorials, they all had their specific audience, whether it being young girls, middle-aged women, middle class, higher class, poor women. They usually all had their specific audience. And because of like the rise of Art Nouveau during this time, all women wanted this like extravagant look even within their everyday fashion choices. So these magazines had an advantage over these women because they were able to show all these different types of women things in the way that they could adapt it within their class. Um, in this art style, the Art Nouveau style also just created this idea of the female gaze. And journalism during this time realized that they could use the female gaze within their writing and illustrations to portray it to women in a bunch of different ways. The editorials were often located within a magazine, or sometimes they were just printed on their own, on just their own piece of paper, and would be slipped in something. So the magazines for like higher end readers during this time really were based on like celebrity gossip, couture, and like lavish lifestyle traits and socialite events. And then obviously the ones for the middle class were more aimed at like educating women on how to dress, where to shop, and how to style their clothing, as they did not have the same access as the socialites of this time did, you know?
Right. Well, women actually began to use flowers during this time to accent their outfits in an Art Nouveau way.
Yeah, and I really like that because it just showed how they could literally find anything around them and like somehow make it fashionable. Like, the women
Yeah.
of this time were literally doing anything they could to accentuate their outfits. These magazines basically and these editorials basically like created the basis for what was to come at the end of the 1800s. The fashion journalism industry grew in ways which it honestly had never been deemed achievable. Journalists did not realize that they could have this power over people just with the conversation of clothing. Hey guys, we're back. So, from around 1890 to 1910, we really see so many new magazines and papers with like editorials come about. And honestly, one of the most influential ones, in my opinion, was the work of Charles Dana Gibson. He created the Gibson Girl, which was the most influential aspect of fashion journalism during this time period. Like, it was everything that every other fashion outlet had literally been missing. Like, Charles Dana Gibson took the words of a thousand things and made it into his illustrations.
Interesting.
This created the Gibson Girl was something that really all women for all ages to look at and enjoy. Like, it became who every woman had wanted to be. This combined the ideas of magazines and editorials literally into an illustration. Like, his work was honestly phenomenal. He had created in his illustrations like the ideal version of a woman using femininity yet progressiveness.
And relating that, back to today, I feel like we still see this today, because many women still want to be portrayed as feminine but put together and well dressed, especially in their workplace. And yeah, like it's even a trend today to make cute workplace outfits that look put together but feminine. So
No, yeah, we definitely see that today, especially on TikTok. People doing like the going around the
little
office and
trends.
seeing what everybody wore.
Yeah.
Yeah, and no, that basically did start with literally the Gibson Girl. She always had this tailored, chic yet sophisticated look. Like, this woman that was portrayed in these illustrations was so feminine, yet she also carried herself with such strength. Like, every woman of the time, like, that is what she wanted to be, like,
Right.
feminine and deemed as beautiful, but like strong. And the Gibson Girl just really like showed that could be possible for these women. And because of this idea of chic yet professional that the Gibson Girl portrayed was also around the time in the early 1900s when women were able to start going to college. And going to college, they were going there for an education. That was their whole thing. Now it's kind of to party, but not then. Then it was for the education. But these women were still young, but they wanted to seem professional. And the Gibson Girl literally showed them that they could do it and they could be successful. And with them showing this femininity, it also portrayed that the Gibson Girl, in order to find femininity, shopping is what you need to do. It literally said that shopping is the whole way to be feminine.
Interesting. So I guess this is where the idea that women love to shop and like that general idea came from.
Yeah, pretty much. And a
Yeah.
lot of stereotypes for women's clothing started in media before the Gibson Girl, but the Gibson Girl really set things in stone because women were just so influenced by it. It was the first one where you could see an impact that all women across America were actually being influenced by it. In another way that the Gibson Girl made a huge influence with the shopping was just mass consumerism and producing. Like, it created this idea that people need to get everything and like just want it. They needed to want all this clothing. They needed to like get it all, And especially with department stores opening, the need to shop and the want to shop was just like everybody wanted it.
Yeah.
And well, my actual favorite part of the Gibson Girl was there was a few illustrations that really stuck out to me. My favorite one is actually called The Weaker Sex, and it's these women who were drawn. They were drawn a bit larger than they were. And they were all looking at a small man on a table with a magnifying glass. And it basically just was like, we're looking down on men the same way they always looked down on us. And another favorite one of my illustrations within the Gibson Girl was the painting of Mr. and Mrs. Ellen Phelps Stokes. This was a woman who was painted in the center of the photo with her hand on her hip, and her outfit was very bright in the photo, and she was just obviously the center, and her husband was just like in the shadow behind her looking frumpy. And I think it really showed how women wanted to be, they wanted to be the center of their family. Like, oh, I do everything, so like I'm gonna be the center of it. And like both of these illustrations just really showed the idea that they were like feminine yet in charge. Like, so basically, like, the influence that we see from the Gibson Girl on journalism just had never been seen before. Like, journalists truly did not believe that the impact they could have on society, especially through something like fashion. Like, obviously, throughout certain things, they realized they could get their attention because everyone needs to read about those things.
Yeah.
But fashion, they just never realized that everybody needs clothes. And this just really created new platforms within journalism in American day life.
That's cool to know because I feel like, well, in my opinion, it sounds like the Gibson Girl was the first ever influencer, which is kind of crazy to think about because, like, considering how popular influencers are.
No, yeah,
now.
I honestly, like, couldn't agree more. Like, she was the first influencer. Like, she literally was. Like, she was the blueprint.
Gibson Girl.
Yeah, so basically, from the Gibson Girl, like, so many other fashion journalism outlets were able to, like, grow and be successful during this time. Like, it really just set new standards for what everything needed to be and how much everyone, specifically women, like, really wanted it. And just like how this time, you know, being known as the Gilded Age, it consisted of just women for like wanting new opportunities in all aspects of their life, and like fashion really was just like one of them. Like, new magazines like Vogue appeared during this time, and it attempted to make the influence that the Gibson Girl did, and it didn't at first, but eventually it did blow up, and now Vogue is obviously the leading fashion outlet of today. The influence of journalism on fashion in these everyday lives was just truly realized during this time. From 1890 to 1910, like, I truly believe that it was the basis for how fashion journalism is today. Like, the reason that society is so heavily influenced by journalism, in my opinion, is because of the way that the Gibson Girls started. Like, it clearly shows that how fashion influenced society so much, you know? So basically, that's just what I have to talk about today, and like life for those women, and then just how they were able to join journalism, and then how this whole own sector of journalism came about for women, and it really just shows how fashion journalism is today. Gabby, did you have anything to say towards the end of this before we close up?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, kind of what I found most interesting was just the general idea of how influencing through journalism started. It kind of really goes to show the message of a picture speaks 1,000 words. People, like, if they hear it from someone they find influencing, they're going to take it and they're going to want to put it in their own life. So it's really interesting to have heard about how that happened with fashion.
Yeah, I'm glad you really enjoyed what you learned today. Like, it was fun telling you all about this, as it's one of my favorite topics to talk about. But we really just can see how with fashion becoming printed on paper, it allowed like the journalism industry itself to like spread and create like this worldwide influence.
I feel like they just really realized how they could influence.
Yeah, like how they could influence.
Like how words on paper really just change people's perspective on things.
Yeah, like they realized the amount of power they had.
Yeah.
Literally. Well, guys, this is the end of this episode. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course.